Hello, welcome to David Eames On Your Mind, a conversation between friends about mental health issues. Hello and welcome to the David Eames On Your Mind podcast. As always, I'm joined by the beautiful Mikey Markham and the extraordinary Owen Oxley.
Oh,
Wow, what a team, what a team.
what did I get?
Beautiful this time.
Now I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, take your pick on how true they are. So I want to talk about something today, which is a common thinking error called the sunk cost fallacy. You may or may not be familiar with it, but the idea is that we keep investing in something. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a business, because we think, well, I've put so much into this now, I can't back out because that's all going to be wasted. Well, the news is it already is. That's the sunk cost, and the fallacy is that we can somehow get that cost back again. We never will. We may be able to make profits in the future, but the costs are gone. And accepting those sunk costs is sometimes the most important thing as a method for moving on. Is it a concept you're familiar with, Mikey?
Definitely. I'd never related it to a relationship before, but when you said that, I can really remember my first relationship, desperately wanting to get out of it for so long and just dragging it on and on and on. But the thing that kept me on the most, it was the memories and nostalgia and everything like that there, but it was just the amount of time. I thought 3 years was a massive amount of time in your first relationship, and I could not potentially see another way. It was like, now I've put 3 years of this into it, I've got to keep hold of it now. So we went on for another year, just lying to oneself like this was going to work, feeling horrible. So yeah, it really resonated with that part of my life. Definitely. Yeah.
What about you, Owen?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult because you sometimes, you know that saying where you don't realise the good times until you're not in them anymore. And I think it's almost reminding yourself and putting like little pins and bookmarks in elements where you felt really good and good memories, because all of a sudden you can snowball into this absolute mountain of shit that you don't know how you got there, and then trying to pull yourself out of that, sometimes by literally pulling the pin to then start again or do whatever, seems like such a monumental task. And I mean, I've had it with bad investments, like a car that we've ended up getting a car for a couple of grand and then chucking 3 or 4 grand into it, that you think, and it comes down to almost fairness sometimes, this overwhelming thought of, well, it's got to work soon because otherwise it wouldn't be fair, when realistically it's just, it can be more simple than that.
Is life supposed to be fair then?
Precisely. And I think that's sometimes what I get caught up on, and it could be relationships or it could be a cost or a thing, but it's a difficult thing to make yourself aware of or take yourself out of without having the interaction of someone like yourself as a counsellor or as a good friend that can go, dude. And it's the difficult conversations to make that, to sort of go, look, just slow down a little bit and just see how you're currently feeling in yourself and how this is affecting you. Because, like, for example, when we had the car, it was a wonderful, wonderful gift from someone that they'd given us this car that was essentially the best thing we should have had. 20,000 miles on it. No one had ever sat in the back. It'd been sat for a while, always serviced, all the rest of it. And then before you know it, we had to buy a new steering rack and a new cam. And so much shit went into it that you think to yourself, before long, we've bought a new car. And then by the time we got to that point, it needed another rack. So strange, and it wasn't garages ripping me off because I knew them personally. It was an inherent fault with this particular car.
One more gift like that would finish you.
Precisely. And it is, and the thing is, you almost have to write off, well, you have to write off that cost, because the problem is it's already gone. But it doesn't make it easier.
No, it doesn't.
But the comfort in the fact that it's this strange invisible weight that's lifted the majority of time, for me anyway, that when I kind of make that decision, the overwhelming peace it brings, there are niggling little elements that are left behind. I mean, even for example, my mum, I've not spoke to my mum for say 2 or 3 years. But the trauma and the stress and everything else that came with it when we would visit or interact And not because of my mum, because of the pricks she decided to rack up with. But that was always way worse. So it breaks my heart to think I've not seen my mum and she's missed out on her grandkids. But that's when I give it chance and I give it time to be thought about. But for the time being, it can be shelved because the piece that it bought me to sort of put a stop to the stress is more important. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does, because I've not got you bending my ear every Friday night about it.
Precisely.
You're a piece with it.
Yeah.
Boy, did you go on about that.
Of course.
Did he really?
And then Chris will join us later, and I have to hear the whole
And I'll tell him the
again.
story again, yeah.
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 So
I could
thank
proper
fuck you dealt with
picture
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit unsympathetic.
But it's true.
Not my usual counsellor self.
But it's the is that the is it the gravitas that you give a situation that essentially you look at and you think, look, just leave it out.
It's that Marcus Aurelius phrase, quoting Epictetus. It's not events themselves that trouble the mind; it's the importance that we give to them.
Yeah.
So sometimes we make choices that turn out to be bad choices, and we find ourselves in a position in which there's no upside.
Yeah.
What do you do next, Mikey?
What do you do next? I mean, we've kind of got a situation like that going on, but a philosophy I had from me dad when I was in my most sort of depressed state was, they can't take the clothes off your back. I always remember, I've said it in this podcast, but it was just an amazing thing I needed at that time. It's so simple. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of, in the worst times and situations, and especially when money's being thrown about or anything like that, I've just put that back in my mind. The only time at the minute where it's been difficult is it also somebody else's money, like somebody I love, my partner, and it's hard to play with their feelings. They're not going to play with their feelings, but help their feelings, placate their feelings, alleviate their feelings, and that's something that plays more on my heartstrings than anything. Because honestly, for myself, I've probably got a bit of a bad relationship with money, in the term of I really don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
To a really stupid degree where you're like, you probably should give a fuck, because it would help. But I always think, I'm doing good now. We're living in a nice environment. We're really happy. It's cool. And then if we lose all that money, we'll make a good situation out of that. That is my belief. But when somebody doesn't share that philosophy necessarily, and you can't ingrain them a philosophy, you just want to help that. But that's where it hurts the most, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, if guilt and things like that and regret, they start kicking in. See, regret, I think, is a really useless emotion, and it's one I've held on to on quite a few occasions and still do from time to time. But try and let go of it, because it serves no purpose, does it? Because regret is, I wish I'd done something differently. Well, you can't.
Do you not take a lesson from it, though?
This is a different thing. This is how you can kind of weaponise the regret to your own benefit.
Okay.
I can't change what happened, so I'm not going to spend my time thinking, I wish I'd done something different. Thinking, what can I learn? First of all, what am I going to do now? That's the first thing. Okay, I feel like I'm absolutely screwed now. So what's the next step? I think it's 10 years ago, more than that now. 15 years ago, Sue and I went on holiday. We haven't been on holiday for years. And we set out for a holiday in the north of Scotland. And we got up near Kendal and the car blew up. And we'd only got local recovery on the car, and it was recovered to a local garage in Kendal. And at that time, the only car hire place that were available would be Manchester Airport.
Okay.
And we got a car full of luggage and a cottage hired in the north of Scotland, the first holiday we'd had in 15 years. And I said to Sue, I think we're screwed, because the car was basically scrap.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's one way out of this. So I went and had a word with the garage owner. I said, have you got a mate who can sell us a cheap car? And he phoned up a dealer who brought us around a Volkswagen Golf, which I bought for 750 quid. No, white one.
All right.
750 quid. And on a credit card, you're not allowed to buy a car on a credit card. But the guy in the garage, because I asked him for his help, he put it through as a repair, and he paid his mate separately. And we set off on the rest of this trip thinking this car's going to blow up at any second. I ran it actually for 2 years, sailed through its MOT.
Yeah.
But it was that there's only one way out of this.
Yeah.
We are screwed. I literally don't know what we do now.
Yeah.
There's one possible route. Hey, I got lucky there. There is no such thing as luck. But use that, rather than sitting there thinking, just no, let's.
But this is it. And
Is there a way
Quite
out?
like that feeling. Do you
Yeah.
know when you're in the absolute mud?
And the rest of that holiday and beyond that, we described it to ourselves not as a disaster but as an adventure. Here's an adventure. We were tested and we survived.
Yeah.
and I think
And we had a great holiday.
yeah.
We got no money to spend.
No,
when we were there.
Mate, I'm with
but
you
that
all the way. Yeah.
but it makes it such a good memory.
Yeah.
And there's so many times like that when if you can slow your brain down enough to go, are you okay? Are you alive? Everyone okay? Right. What are you going to do? And mate, I've been there. I mean, I can remember pulling up at Egg and literally 10 yards away from the thing, my cam belt went on my van. And the van cost me 400 quid. Since I had the van, it probably made me upwards of 10 grand of doing deliveries and pickups and drop-offs and lending it people. And I was still frustrated that because it meant so much to me. It was important to me because I got it after, because I'd basically, when I got back off our honeymoon, my wife she'd spent so long planning the wedding. She'd spent so long being balls deep in all the organisation. We had the best honeymoon we've ever had in Cuba. And we got back and you could see that all the jam had been squeezed out of a donut. And it was heartbreaking because this person that now it's always meant so much to you, is just, you could see that she was kind of kicking rocks. And I felt bad for her. And we'd had this really long flight. We were all exhausted. I said, what are you going to do? She went, I think I'd like to get the cameras developed. You know, the ones that are on the tables around the venue. So I was like, no, I'll shoot it. No, leave it. We'll do it another day. I said, no. So I literally jumped in the car, shot down to my intent to go to a 1 hour processing place, and I wrote the car off. Mm-hmm. I mean, she could have been a widow. And my biggest issue was the fact I just filled the tank with fuel. Mm-hmm. So at the time, heartbroken and frustrated and angry and all the other emotions that come with it, and really frustrated because I loved the car, to then go back and then my wife to be actually pleased that I'm still alive. And then from that, someone turned up with this van that I could get for 400. Like the driver's side door didn't work. Mm-hmm. But to me, it was my new thing that we managed to, it wasn't a big thing, it wasn't an expensive thing, but it was a means to an end. Mm-hmm. And I embraced it. And that van meant so much to me. Mm. So, but then again, when that went, the cycle starts again, doesn't it? And I think it's just what are you made of? Or is it what's your metal? Mm-hmm. Like what have you got built in that can, because of the sunken cost theory, there's two elements, isn't there? There's experience in that, and then how you come out the other side. Mm. And I think that because they are kind of together and disjointed at the same time, it's more working out a strategy for each, if that makes sense.
Being able to exhibit resilience.
Yeah.
To deal with that when all of the costs that you've sunk have led to nothing.
Yeah.
And then do you pick yourself up by your bootstraps? And the more often you do it, in some ways the harder it gets, but in some ways the easier as well, because you get through stuff. You recognise that there's no way out, but there's always a way through until you die.
Yeah.
And then the game's
Amen.
over, so who cares?
Yeah.
And that's just as scary as the time before you were born, which is not at all.
Yeah.
We were talking before as well about the difference between the sunk cost theory and buyer's remorse. Mm-hmm. How is there a difference there?
Well, buyer's remorse is that, I want that car. Oh, that's the car I want. Yeah, I've always wanted a Lamborghini. And then, you drive up to the garage and you can't open the window to pay for your parking ticket.
Yeah.
And it's that, shit, I've spent a lot of money on this.
Yeah.
And buyer's remorse it's that thing whenever you invest a lot in something, there's that, I've invested a lot, which maybe comes before the sunk cost thing. So it may be slightly related, but it's just down to that crap. Because we've all done that. You bought something on impulse and then afterwards regretted it.
Worst feeling ever.
Well, I think a lot of it.
I did it on a camera once. I remember I woke Chrissy up at midnight because I'd just got this money through, and it was a Sony camera, really good. The other cameras are available.
But not as good, you say?
Yeah.
Expecting a Sony sponsorship.
No, it was
from
great. Yeah. I nearly said other cameras are available again. No, it was a Sony camera. I was really excited by it because everyone had said how amazing it was. But then I bought it, and then just a little thought came to mind. I wonder how long it films for. And doing podcasts, you need it to go as long as possible, as long as it can, with a dummy battery in. And then I went on a tutorial and it couldn't go for longer than 20 minutes, something.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, that's basically the main job that I do.
Yeah.
And I was like, Chrissy, how do I get my money back? It was the worst.
There's a technique to avoid moments like that, which is if you don't need it right now,
Yeah.
Write it
and
down.
there's that desire that I really want that thing, wait a week and see if you still really want
Yeah.
it.
That's a really good piece of advice.
Because there's lots of stuff that I've not bought as a result of that, and there are times in the past when I've bought many things when I've not applied that rule.
Yeah. I think that depends on the availability of the thing, because I am a big fan of TK Maxx, because I love a jumble sale, love a car boot, and I know it's all new, but it's the fact of there's so much shit there that is a one-off of something that I'm not going to get again. And the amount of times I have not buyer's remorse because I didn't get something that it was maybe £2 or £3 that then I left, and then I've found 1,000 reasons for needing it afterwards. And I think it's all with a lot of it, and I don't know if this is just because of my status in life with not having a lot of money, that I will always either over justify or under justify something that is needed, or that I shouldn't have it. And I have this inner conflict the whole time. Like, well, I could tell Stacey, like the other day, for example, she was using my multi-tool to sand all of the skirting board and architrave in our house. Now, a multi-tool is for detail, just a little bit of sanding, whereas she's doing architrave, skirting, you name it, and we needed a bigger orbital sander. All of my tools are Milwaukee, which, for whatever reason, are one of the most expensive in my price range. And I could see her struggling, and I thought to myself, she needs the tool. And so we had a fish tank on the side that we'd bought for Libby and she'd lost interest in, and we'd listed it for, say, £60. Not a sniff. I'd also done a quick update for someone on a website that I wouldn't normally charge for, but I thought, do you know what? Times aren't the best. I'm going to let him know it's going to be £20. So then I thought to myself, well, even if I get 40 for the fish tank and 20 for this, the sander's 100. It's only cost me 40. And I couldn't even go and say that to her because I know she would have picked the peanuts out of that shit to
Because
say
it's cost you 100.
exactly. But that's not the point.
It's like, oh darling, I've just saved £50.
Yeah.
No, you spent 250.
So I went to the shop, got her the sander, made sure I got the sanding disc, gave it straight to her, and we went through the whole, oh, you shouldn't have, yeah, but, oh, well, what if, all that shit. And then I realised I had to convince her then, and to be fair, she's used it, and it's now part of the kit, but it's that either not feeling worthy or just not giving you, like not being confident enough to say, this is what I need, that's what I'm going to get, because you know, what if the kids need shoes, or what if this, and it's because I've been brought up with not always having too much of anything. It's always been a hustle, it's always been a deal. Like, you remember back in the day, you would go and buy yourself a video game ready for Friday, and he'd say, right, I've got mine, what are you doing? I say, right, well, I've got this stapler that I know someone in Manchester wants, so I'm going to have to drive it to them to swap it for a frog. That frog's then going to go to the zoo. I need to then get a load of hay. That's going to go to the farm. That's going to come back. I'm going to get these other box of fixings for scaffolding. That's going to go to Dave at the scaffolding place. Then I'm going to have 37 quid. I'm going to need 3. Do you know what I mean? And it was always like a mishmash of nonsense. So in the grand scheme, probably cost me well over the cost of the game. But it felt like I was doing the right thing. The hustle, the buying this to sell that, to make this, to do this. And it was always the flip.
Yeah.
And getting older and looking back at that, I appreciate, because when I see my kids interact with people and not have the same value for money, it kind of, I don't want them to have the same upbringing. I don't want them to have the same struggles, but at the same time, I want them to have the same sort of values.
Well, you did quite enjoy the Del Boy, though, didn't you?
I fucking love it. I still love it. I still do. And if there's a deal to be had or a way to work something, I would much, because it's more interesting and it makes a better story. And I think the whole meaning of life is the story. It's only memories. That's all we've got. All you've got is memories. You don't live it at the time. You just remember it.
But you see, the way it works for me now is, now I'm poorer, I just say, well, I'll do without, and then Owen does some flips to get it for me.
Well, exactly. It was like when I'm walking up your stairs with a freezer on my shoulder. And literally, that was the neighbour. Do you want a freezer? A freezer? Stace? No. I went, yeah. She went, what? I said, yeah, I'll just put it down the garden. She went, well, what if I see it? I said, I'll put it behind the shed. She went, oh, right. And obviously not happy about it, in the slightest, carried it down the garden. 2 weeks later, David said, you don't know anyone with a freezer, do you? Because I've got a really nice fridge freezer. Unfortunately, this bit's broke. I went, yeah, I'll be there in 20 minutes. So I picked it up. She went, where are you going with that now? I said, David needs a freezer. She went, oh, yeah. has it because it fit too perfectly, and now he's got a freezer. But they
Still work.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just the hustle. But I think, and even Del Boy, when he won the millions, I'll never forget. He went back, and Rodney found him in the room picking up his suitcase, and making out that he's running away from the police because there's something in that. Just going out and buying something isn't the same as hustling for something. It feels a lot. I'm not saying you have to break the law, but it's just there is a beauty in it and an appreciation in what you get in the end.
Yeah, well, you like the idea of getting something, not necessarily for nothing, but, winning. It's a game.
Yeah, it is a
Are
game.
you inspired by Only Fools and Horses?
But
I
think,
loved
but
it.
I think,
I loved it.
I think we're going off on a different track there. Bringing it back to where we were, maybe there's that idea there of viewing life as a game when you get in that sunk cost position, where everything is just turned to crap.
Yeah.
And okay, well, we've just lost the cup tie. We've been relegated. We're dead. We're going to lose half the team. What we're going to do now? Are we going to give up, or are we going to push on?
Well, I think even when you said then, you're going off topic, I think Del Boy is probably the best analogy to use because every episode there was reams of new shit that you hadn't seen before, and it never stopped him.
This time next year.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
didn't stop him, and it didn't mean that they were all...
That's
or
a good metaphor, really.
they
I
weren't
like that.
all
Yeah.
winners, and not everything is all winner, but he survived, and he had kids and a wife and all the rest of it, and he had a life, and I
Still
think
humorous.
that's
still
it, and I
happy
think
with his family.
it does make you the person that you are.
Yeah.
Like when I took the kids to took them to the car boot, and Libby wanted something, and she said, "Ask him how much." I went, "I'm not buying it." I said, "You can have the money for it, but you get it, and you don't pay the price he says." And she did. And then from now on, she's walking in. How much is this bike? And they're like, 100 quid. She go, 2 quid. And he's like, looking at me and say, started a bit young. I'm like, well, give it her for 2 quid. Otherwise, we're not going to leave you alone. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I hope it avoids the sunk cost theory. And I hope, because it is a heartbreaking situation to come, relationship, physical, whatever it is a really, really horrible thing to come to terms
I want to
with.
stress at this point, I'm not saying don't feel it. Absolutely not saying that.
No.
Because sometimes it's a real kick in the guts. You just feel so let down that was I like quoting Kipling, if you can see the things you gave your life to broken, stop and build them up with worn out tools.
Yeah.
There's that view of it hurts, it really hurts, but you've got to move forward. It's that resilience being a choice, and dealing with that. Because the whole thing about the sunk cost fallacy is that it's a little bit like dealing with bereavement. A key thing with dealing with loss is recognising the reality of the loss.
Yeah.
Because if you can't accept that someone you love has died, you're not going to start getting over that loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the things that you love died, the business or whatever it is, we'll deal with the fact that that's gone, what we're going to do next. We're still alive, what we're going to do next. At the very least, we're still above the grass, what we're going to do next.
And I think there's a management to it as well. I don't think it necessarily means that you have to get up tomorrow and you've heard this and go, all right, everything's fucked. Because the problem is there is so many stories that you hear, even famously someone like FedEx. I know that FedEx as a company were completely screwed. And the owner at the time took all of the money they had and took it to Vegas. And he put it all on red or put it all on black. This is apparently the story, which I'd like to believe is true. Yeah.
Okay.
And essentially, the FedEx is now what it is today. And obviously, he managed to
that
pay
moment.
everyone, and they carried on. There was that moment. But that moment for FedEx, as such, is so rare in comparison to all the failures or all the times before. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to say everything's screwed, we've fucked it. It might be going, right, all right, so for the next... we'll see what we can do for the next couple of months. Or we've got like when I got made redundant, and Say says you can go self-employed, no problem. Because obviously we had Moo that was two and a half, and Libby that was not born yet. And I decided I want to be self-employed. To which anyone else would be like, "No, you maniac. There's gonna be jobs. Go and get something. You know what you're doing." Excuse me. She basically put $5,000 in an account and said, "When that's gone, you're done." And I was like, "Oh," and it made it real. But he gave me the chance. I had the opportunity, and it was only up to me to fuck it up myself. So because then I had something physical to look at to go, okay, well, I'm not going to go and buy myself 2 more Macs just to be flash. I'm going to get myself a reconditioned Mac. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it made it a lot more manageable because I know ultimately the responsibility came down to me.
And Princess Trust brought you a Mac, didn't they?
Yes, through doing a shitload of work, which I was jumping through hoops, but it was all part of this is all towards that. And if it goes bang and the $5,000 runs out, the Mac that's now sat in my kitchen will still be sat in the kitchen. That will be sat on the side, but there's a way of working out, can I do it? And I'm accountable for what I'm doing.
The opposite approach, there was a round of redundancies going on at Egg, and there was a guy called Jeff who worked there, and he decided if he was made redundant, he was going to go to Monte Carlo and he was going to put it all on red or black, his redundancy money, and if he won, he'd been okay. He'd only doubled it, so I don't see how that made everything okay forevermore. Or if he lost, he was going to go up the mountain and sit in a forest until he died. That was not a good strategy.
No, either way.
I just think,
either side.
It was just
either side.
not. So the FedEx story, he wasn't made redundant. He wasn't going to be made redundant.
No.
We got unnaturally anxious
Yeah.
that it was going to happen to him because his life was terrible.
I was hoping you were going to say, I'm going up the hill to see him next week.
Yeah, he built a house. He
go-
won his winnings and built a house. up there.
Go collect his bones. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is acknowledging it that it might be a situation. I think that's the first.
Yeah.
Especially for me, for a lot of things, because it's easy to kid yourself. It's easy to justify it to yourself, or it's easy to try and cope to think, I don't want there to be a change. So relationship, it doesn't necessarily just mean that someone's not going to like you anymore. What's going to happen with this? Am I going to have to buy a new Hoover? Where do I live? What's that? And there's so much. Like my sister was one of my best friends for so many years that it made her such a different person. And it was only one day that she blew up at me and went fucking postal. I was like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, sometimes it can only be someone so close that can have these real conversations. And she went, oh, well, we've just got debt free. And I was like, right, you're debt free and miserable. She's like, what? And she's older than me, so obviously she knows more, apparently. And she's like, well, we're debt free, so it should be all right. And I was like, there's not a book. Doesn't mean just because you've got no debts now the person that you don't particularly feel attracted to or love anymore is going to change. You're just debt free. You've got one less thing to worry about on a monthly basis. You fucking idiot. And she went, yeah, well, and I was like, well, as a brother, he's like, just handle your shit. Stop. What are you doing? Just be happy. She's like, yeah, well, I won't have anything. I said, do you not think we'll not have you back? I'm not going to pay you rent for you, but there will be a facility. There will be something we can do. And she's like, oh. And then before you know it, he's knocking on my fucking door.
Oh, really?
All right, mate. She's left me. And I was like, well, yeah. But he kind of didn't appreciate what he had, and it wasn't working, and it was just not right for them.
Yeah. So I think we've hopefully covered this topic in our usual random way. 2 things I think I want you to take away from this. Firstly, try and be honest with where you are, and then figure out what's the next step. There may be many more steps required after that, but there's always a next step. Thanks. Goodbye.